Welcome back. We finish our study of James Joyce's Portrait of the Artist as a Young Man by referencing a very classic passage which had tremendous influence on the thinking of not just James Joyce, but a whole lot of other theorists as well. It is a passage which is often misunderstood, the God is dead passage. And I want to just read it. I'll be messing with the Kaufman translation because I think it's the best one. This is from Gay Science, passage 125. I just want to read it, and then we're just going to make a few brief comments specifically as it relates to our study of Portrait of the Artist as a Young Man. Now, if you're watching this lecture and you haven't watched our lecture on portrait, then you need to go to the LearnStrong.net folder of AP and scroll down and find the lecture on James Joyce's Portrait of the Artist as a Young Man to get some sense of background here. The madman. Have you not heard of that madman who lit a lantern in the bright morning hours, ran to the marketplace and cried incessantly, "I seek God, I seek God." As many of those who do not believe in God were standing around just then, he provoked much laughter. Why did he get lost? Why did he get lost? Said one. Did he lose his way like a child? Said another. Or is he hiding? Is he afraid of us? Has he gone on a voyage or immigrated? Thus they yelled and laughed. The madman jumped into their midst and pierced them with his glances. "Whither is God?" he cried. "I shall tell you. We have killed him, you and I. All of us are his murderers. But how have we done this? How were we able to drink up the sea? Who gave us the sponge to wipe away the entire horizon? What did we do when we unchained this earth from its sun? Whither is it moving now? Whither are we moving now? Away from all suns? Are we not plunging continually, backward, sideward, forward, in all directions? Is there any up or down left? Are we not straying as through an infinite nothing? Do we not feel the breath of empty space? Has it not become colder? Is not night and more night coming on all the while? Must not lanterns be lit in the morning? Do we not hear anything yet of the noise of the grave diggers who are burying God? Do we not smell anything yet of God's decomposition? God's too decompose. God is dead. God remains dead. And we have killed him. How shall we, the murderers of all murderers, comfort ourselves? What was holiest and most powerful of all that the world has yet owned has bled to death under our knives. Who will wipe this blood off us? What water is there for us to clean ourselves? What festivals of atonement, what sacred games shall we have to invent? Is not the greatness of this deed too great for us? Must not we ourselves become God simply to seem worthy of it? There has never been a greater deed, and whoever will be born after us, for the sake of this deed, he will be part of a higher history than all history hitherto. Here, the madman fell silent and looked again at his listeners, and they too were silent and stared at him in astonishment. At last, he threw his lantern on the ground and it broke and went out. "I come too early," he said. "Then my time has not yet come. This tremendous event is still on its way, still wandering. It has not yet reached the ears of man. Lightning and thunder require time. The light of the stars requires time. Deeds require time even after they are done, before they can be seen and heard. This deed is still more distant from them than the most distant stars, and yet they have done it themselves." It has been related further that on that same day, the madman entered divers churches, and there sang his requiem. Led out and called to account, he is said to have replied each time, "What are these churches now, if they are not the tombs and sepulchres of God?" Now, without question, this is one of the most controversial passages that was ever penned and mentioned again and again and again in the 20th century and obviously in the 21st century. No question, This is the kind of passage that will stand behind a whole lot of the 1922 Offering, Portrait of the Artist as a Young Man, as well as T.S. Eliot's Wasteland. We're not going to do a lot of exegesis of this passage, but let's at least think a little bit about three things. Notice one. This clearly is not a passage about atheism. To say God is dead is not to say there is no God. It's to say that God is no longer in existence because, notice, we have killed him. This has often been read as the distinction to be made between that oftentimes pronounced distinction between religion, being religious, and being spiritual. The church has become the place where the dead are buried, that is to say, the traditions and the like. Number two, notice the madman comes to the marketplace, to the mall. Go back to our lecture on Socrates and Plato's Republic in onestrong.net's folder, and recognize the ways in which going to the mall, to the agora, makes all the sense in the world. Why wouldn't it make all the sense in the world, right? In other words, that's where buying and selling takes place. You'll remember in the Christian story, Jesus Christ will turn over the tables of the money changers and the like. In other words, it may be that economics, and by extension technology, will explain why humans have killed God, in whatever way you understand that to mean. Finally, number three, notice the question about what happens next. First of all, the question is, new festivals have to be invented. New things have to be understood. But the other question is, when does something like this actually happen? Notice he says, I come too soon, I come too early. The suggestion that there's something coming on the horizon that is going to forever alter the way that we used to think about the world, and of course, the theology of the world, the faith of the world, the religious practices of the world. Now, what does any of this have to do with James Joyce's Portrait of the Artist as a Young Man? I think one of the things that's made clear in our reading study of Portrait of the Artist is that Stephen Dedalus is coming to terms, certainly James Joyce himself as well, but Stephen Dedalus, the hero of the novel, is coming to terms with some questions about the role of religion within modern, and now we call it postmodern society. Notice again, what is postmodernity like? There is no up, there is no down, there is no forwards, there is no backwards. Go back and take a look at our lecture on Dover Beach and Matthew Arnold's classic poem. Same thing, the sea of faith was once two at the full, and round earth's shore lay like the folds of a bright girdle furl, but now I only hear its long withdrawing melancholy roar. The idea that things have fundamentally changed. The question, of course, is for the better or for the worse. It's not completely clear here if our madman is saying God is dead and that's hurrah, or God is dead and that's the end, and it's horrifying. This passage then can be read both as celebratory, but it can also be read as deeply, deeply disturbing. Of course, we have a famous poster in 303, don't we, where at the top of it it says God is dead, and then underneath it says Nietzsche, and then underneath that it says Nietzsche is dead, and then of course that's referenced by God. This passage will give rise to all kinds of interesting tensions, and that's the final point for our study of Joyce. Joyce, as well as T.S. Eliot, will embrace these tensions and will try to express them in beautiful, linguistically beautiful ways. The challenge, obviously, as we read, epistemologically speaking, is what can we know for sure? It seems the fallibilist position probably is the better position to take. Certainly Nietzsche, in his understanding of interpretation and hermeneutics, certainly Nietzsche was a huge proponent of this idea. Ontologically, who are we after we have moved on from religious observances and the like, if in fact that's what has happened at the end of the 20th century, the beginning of the 21st century? And then, of course, psychologically and sociologically, what are the implications of this kind of thing? In terms of theodicy, this is a pivotal question for this passage. Is it a good thing or is it a bad thing that we have killed God? And in what ways, finally to finish at a level 3 question, in what ways can one kill God? I mean, how does that even happen at all? One of the answers seems to be that technology and modern, postmodern life has drained us of the capacity to enjoy the spiritual understandings. And to that degree, life, back to our Baudelaire observation, is full of ennui, boredom. And we're not the people that we could be. We're not the people that we hope to be sometimes. All of that to say, to try and finish on at least a positive note as we study somebody like Joyce, We've not met any 200-year-old people, as we've said often. And that means, of course, go back to our comments at the end of the Faust lecture and Nietzsche's eternal reoccurrence. The idea is that if you're going to swing at the park as a child, you always knew that the van was waiting. And even though you didn't want to go to the van, you had to go to the van. And that's the point, of course, of Dickens' The Christmas Carol, when Scrooge sees on that tombstone his own name there. It's not that he didn't know he was going to die, it's that he's unaware of it. And that's a huge difference, right? Here, notice, we have a lantern that gets broken. That process of waking up, that notion of being dragged out into the light of the sun in our Plato's Republic, Book 7, the Cave Allegory lecture. Go back and look at that at learnstrong.net if you need a refresher there. That notion of awakening. We grow up, but the question is, and certainly the question of this passage is, can we wake up? But what if we wake up and we're not pleased with what we see? That, it seems to me, is the challenge of self-recreation that Joyce will be celebrating in Portrait of the Artist as a Young Man. I hope that you've enjoyed our study, and I hope that you can pick up the novel and it will help you to be able to read and, of course, to grow. Not just up, but wake up. Thank you.